Vikings fans, there's something brewing in Minnesota right now, and you can almost hear it humming beneath the surface. Vikings Nation feels it. The quarterback room has turned into a pressure cooker. Another unexpected quarterback just got linked to the Minnesota Vikings. The team's star tight end suddenly finds himself battling for what comes next, and a young edge rusher is finally starting to receive the recognition fans have been waiting on. But the wildest part of this entire story, more and more people are beginning to believe the Vikings' young first-round quarterback could actually come out on the losing end of this quarterback fight before Week 1 ever arrives. And if that happens, the entire roadmap for this franchise could look very different moving forward. Lately, a familiar tension has started drifting back across this fan base. It's that uneasy sensation where every explanation opens the door to a whole new set of concerns. Because make no mistake, Minnesota has a legitimate quarterback competition unfolding behind those walls. Alec Lewis said it. Tom Pelissero backed it up. This isn't speculation anymore. Kyler Murray entered this situation as the front-runner, and truthfully, that's understandable. He's a former Offensive Rookie of the Year, a two-time Pro Bowler, and when everything is clicking, he can bend a defense out of shape in ways very few quarterbacks are capable of doing. But here's where Vikings fans get hesitant. This franchise has watched talented quarterbacks pass through before. Raw ability by itself doesn't settle nerves around here anymore. People are craving something stronger than talent. They're craving certainty. Then you have J.J. McCarthy, young, untested, carrying the weight of all the expectations that arrived the moment Minnesota invested a first-round pick in him. Kevin O'Connell clearly wants the competition. He wants both quarterbacks sharpening each other every day, like steel against steel. That part is easy to understand. What really made me stop and pay attention was what started circulating regarding Oregon quarterback Dante Moore. Billy Hyan of the Sporting News linked Minnesota to Moore as a possible future alternative if things go sideways. And honestly, that's when the nervousness starts creeping in. Because if Minnesota's name is already showing up alongside another potential early-round quarterback, it suggests people around the league truly think there's a scenario where neither Murray nor McCarthy completely claims the job. That's a heavy thought this early in the process. Dante Moore has talent. The arm strength is there. The upside is obvious. But hearing his name connected to Minnesota right now feels a little like spotting dark clouds gathering on the horizon. Nobody wants this team drafting in the top 10 again because that would mean the season went off the rails somewhere. And while all this quarterback uncertainty dominates the conversation, another storyline quietly slipped into view that honestly caught me off guard even more. Ivan Pace Jr., one of the most beloved underdog stories on this roster, is suddenly being mentioned as a possible cut candidate. That's tough to even process. Kyle Judry highlighted Minnesota reducing his role, Eric Wilson passing him on the depth chart last season, and the cap flexibility that comes with releasing him without any dead money attached. Football can be ruthless. One day, you're the lunch pail player fans rally behind. The next day, the business side arrives like a closed door. And if Pace eventually loses his roster spot this offseason, it'll serve as another reminder that this team is moving into a very different chapter from the one so many fans grew attached to just a few years ago. And right when it seemed like this quarterback story couldn't get any more bizarre, ESPN poured fuel straight onto the situation. Seth Walder proposed a trade scenario that would send Anthony Richardson to Minnesota in exchange for a 2027 fifth-round pick. My first reaction was to dismiss it immediately. Then the more I thought about it, the harder it became to ignore. Because honestly, it feels exactly like the type of gamble Kevin O'Connell could convince himself is worth exploring. Richardson remains one of the most gifted athletes playing the position. He's 6'4", owns a rocket launcher for an arm, and moves in ways quarterbacks simply aren't supposed to move. The ceiling is easy to see. The issue has always been everything surrounding it. Injuries, inconsistency, benchings, uncertainty, turbulence. Indianapolis reportedly gave him permission to pursue a trade, and that alone tells a pretty clear story about how unstable things became there. From Minnesota's perspective, though, you can at least understand why the idea would be tempting. Kyler Murray only has a one-year deal. McCarthy still hasn't erased every doubt. Carson Wentz profiles as a bridge more than anything else. Max Brosmer remains a developmental project. Now imagine adding Richardson to that group. Suddenly the quarterback room starts resembling a crowded intersection rather than a clear path forward. And situations like that aren't always ideal for a locker room searching for stability. What really stood out to me was ESPN openly raising the possibility that Richardson could eventually represent a better long-term bet than McCarthy. That's the discussion Vikings fans would rather avoid right now, because McCarthy was supposed to be the future. The quarterback Kevin O'Connell would shape into the face of the franchise. Yet here we are heading into another offseason where outsiders are already questioning whether Minnesota might need to reconsider before that vision ever fully takes shape. Emotionally, that's dangerous ground for a fan base that has spent decades searching for stability at quarterback. Financially, sure, a fifth-round pick is a small price. For a former top-5 talent, it's almost pocket change. But roster construction doesn't work that way. Somebody gets pushed aside. Maybe Carson Wentz loses his place. Maybe Max Brosmer fades into the background before getting a real opportunity. Or maybe, and this is the possibility nobody wants to say too loudly, McCarthy becomes part of a larger reset conversation if he starts losing momentum during camp. Imagine what happens if Murray clearly outperforms him throughout preseason. That conversation would explode overnight. That's why this rumor feels heavier than a typical trade discussion. It feels more like Minnesota quietly laying contingency plans across the table because deep down, they may not completely know what this quarterback room is about to become. At the same time, one of the biggest veterans on this offense just received a message that couldn't be much clearer. Deliver now, or the future becomes a lot harder to predict. Earlier this offseason, Minnesota adjusted T.J. Hawkinson's contract. Tom Pelissero laid out the details, and while the move reduced his cap hit by $5 million, it also erased the final year from his deal. That detail matters more than people realize, because now Hawkinson is heading toward 2026 with contract year pressure staring him directly in the face. Vikings fans know those situations can become emotional roller coasters. Sometimes players thrive under that spotlight. Sometimes the pressure changes everything. Hawkinson has consistently been one of the toughest and most dependable pieces of this offense whenever he's healthy. But this situation feels different because the competition for opportunities continues growing. Justin Jefferson remains the centerpiece. Jordan Addison is pushing for a larger share. Jawan Jennings has entered the picture as well. And depending on which quarterback wins the job, the passing attack itself could take on a completely different personality. That's where things become fascinating. If Kyler Murray earns the starting role, there's reason for excitement because Murray has historically leaned on his tight ends. That could create another huge statistical season for Hawkinson. If McCarthy wins instead, that chemistry still has to be forged under real game pressure. Luke Norris pointed out that Hawkinson is effectively auditioning for his next contract right now, whether that contract ultimately comes from Minnesota or somewhere else. That's simply the reality of the situation. And honestly, it's strange imagining this offense without him, because for a long stretch he felt like one of the cornerstones holding Kevin O'Connell's system together. The tough catches across the middle, the reliability on third down, the physical edge, the leadership, the kind of player quarterbacks grab onto when everything around them starts shaking. But the NFL changes direction fast, especially once contracts and salary cap flexibility start driving decisions. Rob Brzezinski has never hesitated to make difficult choices when he believes it strengthens the roster long term. We've watched that happen before. So now the spotlight shifts directly onto Hawkinson. A huge season gives him leverage. A quieter season, suddenly the road ahead becomes foggy in a hurry. And the wild part is that while all these offensive questions continue piling up, another young Viking may finally be arriving defensively at exactly the right moment. Here's something people often forget. Sometimes a player grows in the background for so long that everyone stops noticing how much potential is sitting there waiting. That's where Dallas Turner finds himself right now. When Minnesota selected him 17th overall in 2024, the vision seemed obvious. Future star, explosive edge threat, defensive difference maker. Then reality took a different turn. Jonathan Greenard and Andrew Van Ginkel immediately formed one of the best edge-rushing tandems in football. Suddenly, Turner was standing backstage waiting for his moment rather than performing under the spotlight. For young pass rushers, that waiting game can become frustrating quickly. Fans start wondering. Questions start circulating. People begin asking whether the investment was justified. But development doesn't always move in a straight line. Sometimes growth happens underground before anyone notices what's coming. Quietly, Turner started flashing near the end of last season. NFL.com's Tom Blair pointed out that his 8-sack campaign almost slipped beneath the radar, especially since 4.5 of those sacks came late in the year when many people had already mentally moved on from Minnesota's season. Inside the building, though, those performances didn't go unnoticed. Coaches saw it. Teammates saw it. The organization saw it. Those flashes carried more significance than most people realize. And now, with Jonathan Greenard gone, the door is finally swinging open. This is the opportunity Turner has been waiting for. The chance to become the player Minnesota envisioned on draft night. And the timing couldn't be more important because this franchise desperately needs one of its recent first-round investments to truly break through. Whether that player ends up being Turner or McCarthy, somebody from that era of roster construction needs to emerge as a foundational piece. That expectation is very real. Then came the comment that probably made a lot of Vikings fans wince. Bleacher Report's Gary Davenport essentially argued that the quarterback battle may already be decided before it officially begins. In his view, Kyler Murray simply holds the advantage over McCarthy in nearly every measurable area right now. More experience, more production, a stronger resume, and logically speaking, it's hard to argue with that. Emotionally, though, Vikings fans aren't searching for logic. They're searching for belief. They want the quarterback they invested in to become the future, rather than another promising chapter that never reaches its ending. Because if McCarthy loses this competition outright, the spotlight on him will become even more intense. Every pass at camp will be analyzed. Every mistake will be magnified. But if he beats Murray, then maybe, finally, Minnesota really has found the long-term answer it has been chasing. That's why this training camp feels so massive. Not only for 2026, but for where this franchise is headed throughout the next decade. That's exactly why this team keeps pulling people back in right now. The talent is there. The opportunities are there. The hope is there. But pressure is stacking up across nearly every important area of the roster. Questions at quarterback, veterans trying to secure their futures, young players fighting to prove they belong. It feels like the identity of this entire franchise is standing at a crossroads waiting for the next signal. And maybe that's the reason Vikings fans stay invested, no matter how draining the journey becomes. Because eventually, all of this uncertainty, all of this waiting, and all of this tension has to arrive somewhere meaningful. So jump into the comments and tell me this. Who do you trust the most to influence where this franchise goes next? Kyler Murray, J.J. McCarthy, or someone we aren't even discussing yet? Until next time, keep riding with the purple and gold. SKOL Vikings, let's go!